Hi friends! So today, as usual, we will be preparing something that doesn't require any special equipment. So if you guys don't have a mixer or an oven at home, that is perfectly okay. This recipe will work well for you. What we do need for today are strong arms because we will be doing a lot of kneading. So that should give you a clue. Yes, we are making bread today. A couple of you guys requested that we learn how to make bread without the use of an oven. And so I ended up with cream cheese buns. And these popular Chinese snacks are actually made up of a cream cheese mixture and covered with some bread dough. And instead of cooking it in the oven, we will be using a non-stick frying pan and a stove top. And so yeah, all we need today, ang ating puhunan lang ay uh, strong arms, frying pan, and a stove. And hopefully at the end of this, we will have something yummy to eat. So our recipe today has two parts, the filling and the bread. For the filling, we'll need 1 pack of cream cheese, which is about 250 grams, 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, so make sure you sift this so that no lumps remain. And then I'll give you an option depending on what flavor you want to impart in your filling. You can add in 1 tablespoon of milk and 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, or if you want a citrusy flavor that cuts through the fat of the cream cheese, you can use 1 tablespoon of lemon juice and the zest of half a lemon. For the bread part of the recipe, we're going to be needing 2 cups of bread flour. If you don't have bread flour, it's okay to use all-purpose flour. We'll also be needing 1 egg, 2 tablespoons of white sugar, 1/4 cup cornstarch, 1/4 cup softened butter, 1/2 cup fresh milk, a pinch of salt, and 1.5 teaspoons of instant yeast or active dry yeast. Because yeast thrives in warm temperature, you have to make sure that your milk is warm. Not too hot, just enough so that you can stick your finger in. Maybe about 15 seconds in the microwave. So we'll start with the bread part of the recipe. Now if you're using active dry yeast, you would need to mix your sugar and your yeast with the milk and then let it sit and bloom for about 10 minutes before you add it into your flour. But since we're using instant yeast, I can just mix my yeast with all my dry ingredients. So we'll start with the bread flour, and the recipe called for 2 cups, but we'll put in 1 cup first. And then we'll add in our cornstarch, our sugar, our yeast, and then we'll give it a quick whisk just to make sure that everything is mixed in. So I'm adding in my salt and my wet ingredients. So this includes the warmed milk, again not too hot as this may kill the yeast, and our egg. So I'll give this a mix with my spatula until all of the flour has been mixed in with the wet ingredients. And this will end up really sticky. So what we'll do is we'll slowly add in the rest of our flour. We might not end up using all of our 2 cups of flour, and that's perfectly fine. Measuring with cups ends up with a lot of inaccuracies, and so we'll do this by feel. No, so we add the flour and we keep on kneading, which is basically just folding the dough onto itself until such a time when it no longer sticks to your fingers. So it might be tacky, meaning it has a slightly sticky feel and it's not completely dry. In fact, we don't want it to be completely dry. But it doesn't outrightly stick to your fingers anymore. And the flour also doesn't stay stuck to the bowl as well. So the flour is in the dough already. So we can keep on folding the dough onto itself while we are rotating the bowl. And eventually we will transfer the dough to the surface. So at this point, I'm having sort of a hard time kneading it in the bowl. So I will move it to a flat surface to make it easier. And I will continue kneading until you don't see clumps of flour on the surface of the dough any longer. So it more or less pretty well mixed in with the dough. So if your dough is still super sticky and you find it hard to actually do any kneading, and as long as you haven't finished your flour yet, you can add in just a little just to help you with the stickiness of the dough. So there are actually several techniques by which you can knead dough. So if it's your first time kneading, I suggest you take a look at videos that show the different ways by which you can do it and then pick the technique that you are most comfortable with. You can also mix techniques, of course, depending on how the dough feels under your hand. So we'll just keep on kneading this until the flour has been fully incorporated into the dough and you don't see clumps of dry flour on the surface anymore. So we reach the point where we see that the dough is a bit more pliable and we don't see clumps of flour on the surface anymore. Everything seems to be mixed in pretty well. We will add our softened butter. We will do this in 3 batches. So we'll put the softened butter onto the dough and we start kneading and folding it in. And it might seem impossible, like you probably won't be able to imagine how this dough will absorb this butter, but trust me, it will. So we just keep on kneading until we see that the butter has been fully incorporated into the dough. It's gonna be messy, but just keep at it, and eventually the butter will be fully mixed in with the dough. After a few minutes of kneading, we see that the butter has been fully incorporated into the dough, and so we add in, the next batch of butter. Again, we do this until we finish all of our butter. So we'll know the dough is ready when it is smooth and elastic. Those are the two words that we are looking for. And there are several ways to tell if the dough is elastic enough, which I'll show you a bit later on. Smooth just means that you don't feel any more clumps of anything under your fingers while you're kneading. And this signifies that really you've been able to mix in and incorporate all of the ingredients well, and that the flour is on its way to creating the structure necessary to be able to withstand the rise or the gases emitted by the yeast. So at this point, we see that all the butter has been fully incorporated into the dough, and so we just keep on kneading. So this is where the arm workout really starts, guys. 5 minutes later, and I'm still at it. And really, the amount of time needed to knead the dough will differ depending on how you knead it. But there are ways by which you can see if the dough is ready. Here I'll try to stretch the dough, and we can see that the dough is already quite elastic, but still breaks apart easily when we stretch it. And so we'll knead for a few more minutes. We're almost there, guys. So after a few more minutes of kneading, we can try again to do the window pane test. So let's put it in a ball. And then let's take a small piece of the dough. And we'll try to stretch it out different directions. And if you're able to stretch it out thin enough that you can basically see your fingers underneath with the dough without the dough breaking, as you can see here, then your dough is ready. An alternative way is actually shining a flashlight underneath it, and if the light somehow filters through, then the dough is ready. Apart from that, we also want our dough to be springy, and so another way to test to see if the dough is ready is just by trying to put indents on it. And if the dough springs back, then your dough is also quite ready. So we'll lightly oil a bowl, and we will be putting our dough in it to rest for an hour. So we'll cover this with a cling wrap, and we'll put it in a warm place in the kitchen because yeast likes warm temperature. But since we're actually feeling an unusually hot summer here in the Philippines, you might actually have to look for a cooler place than the 40 degrees we currently have. So the optimal temperature for the yeast is 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. We don't want it too hot because we might end up overproofing it. So we'll let this rest for about an hour or until it has doubled in size. While we wait for the dough to proof, we start making our filling. And basically we'll just be mixing all of the filling ingredients together. So we start off with our 1 cup or 1 pack of cream cheese, and just for easier handling, we need to make sure that our cream cheese is softened. If you have a mixer, feel free to use it, but I'm just using a whisk to mix everything together. So I keep on mixing the cream cheese just until there are no more lumps and it is quite smooth. Once the cream cheese is completely smooth, meaning there are no more clumps to be found, you can add in your chosen flavorings. So I'm adding in the 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, and I'm zesting my half a lemon and putting that zest in there. But if you want the vanilla flavor, you can also add in the milk and vanilla at this point in time. And basically, we just mix it in to make sure that it is incorporated well into the mixture before we add in our powdered sugar. So we can add in our powdered sugar when everything is mixed in, and we just continue whisking it until all of the powdered sugar has been incorporated into the mixture. There are no more lumps, and the mixture is really smooth and silky. And so when everything is very well mixed in and the mixture is very silky, we can cover this with cling wrap and then put it in the refrigerator just to make it easier to work with later on when we try to put it into the dough. So we'll cover this with cling wrap and we'll put it inside the refrigerator. So after about an hour, the dough has doubled in size, and we know it's ready because when we try to poke a hole in it, the hole doesn't bounce back. So we punch it a few times to remove all of the air bubbles inside, and we knead it just a little bit to redistribute the yeast in the dough. So we'll divide this dough into the individual servings. If you have a kitchen scale and you want it exact so that the sizes are uniform, you can weigh this out by like 75 grams each. But since I'm just serving it here at home, I'm just gonna eyeball it, and I'll cut this dough into 8. It probably means I'll have big pieces and small pieces, but it's okay. And so I take each of the dough and I try to round it out by rolling it on a flat surface, like so. So I'll do this for all of the 8 pieces. I'm done rounding the 8, and we are now ready to roll it out and fill it in, but in the meantime I will be storing it on my silicone mat. You can also actually just line a baking sheet with parchment paper just to make sure that the dough doesn't stick. So we'll get our rolling pin to roll the dough out. And if you don't have a rolling pin, you can use other cylindrical objects. I have been known to use a wine bottle before, although you have to be careful not to break it. So we get a rolling pin and we roll it out flat. So if the dough sticks to the surface, you can add a little bit of flour on the surface just so that it doesn't stick. But I find that mine is still a bit workable, so I won't be doing that. Oh, also, just to make sure that the dough doesn't dry out, you can put a damp piece of tea cloth or kitchen towel on your dough. This will keep the surface of your dough very moist. So we'll continue rolling out the dough until it is round and flat, because this is where we will be putting in our filling. And so we'll be putting in about 1 to 2 tablespoons of the cream cheese filling that we had prepared earlier. So we'll put that in the middle of our dough, and we seal the dough by pinching it together. So we pinch it together into a ball and then we roll it again on the surface. just to seal it, because we need to make sure that the cream cheese doesn't seep out. And then we use the rolling pin to pat it out and to flatten it a bit. So we do this for all of the 8 balls that we had prepared. So we see that leaving the cream cheese mixture in the refrigerator for about an hour has made it not so soft, and so it's much easier to work with it now. And so we stuff another piece of dough with the cream cheese, and we try to pinch it while rotating the dough just to make sure that it is sealed completely. And then we again roll it on the surface. And we flatten it a bit using the rolling pin. So when we're done with all 8, we can cover it with our damp tea cloth and let it rest for another 30 minutes. After 30 minutes of resting, our dough would have doubled in size, and so are now ready to be cooked. And there's no oil required. All we need to do is get a non-stick frying pan and heat it up on low heat. Now we will be using low heat because we need the dough to cook thoroughly. Now, if the heat is too high, the dough will start browning without necessarily getting cooked inside. After about 7 minutes, we can check the underside and see that it's a deep golden brown, and this is the color that we are looking for. So we flip it over to cook the other side. Please bear in mind though that the underside will take longer to cook. This is where you pinch the dough, since that side will be thicker than the top side. So we'll cook this for another 5 minutes. So after 5 minutes, we're done. And so it's now time to enjoy what we made. Cream cheese bun. Enjoy, guys.